Hello, welcome to Postcolonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today I'll briefly talk about discursiveness or discursivity. You might have often read while reading an article or a book, someone says such and such is discursively produced, or this is discursive, not necessarily real. So, what do they mean by it? Now, if you just looked up discursive and its literal meanings, that's completely different. There is a discursive style of writing which jumps from one place to another, doesn't follow any logical sequence. That is not what we are talking about. Something being discursive comes from Michel Foucault, so it's derived from discourse. So when you say that a fact or a statement or any claims are discursive, what you're basically suggesting is that it is produced within a discourse, right? That there is a discourse behind it. And unless we understand the discourse that constitutes a certain truth, we cannot really know what it means, right? And hence it is important to see the discursive structure within which a sign is posited or produced. So in that sense, discursivity is the appearance in a discourse, so to speak, of any given truth or any given idea. Now that idea means something within that discourse. If we detach it from that discourse and read it elsewhere, it might lose its meaning or its significance, right? Anytime you read in a text that this concept, this idea of truth is discursive and we should not read it literally, what the person means is that there is no natural truth to this aspect. And the reason this comes across as truth to us is because of the discourse within which this concept is produced, which stabilizes it and within which it means something, right? So that leads us to this other whole inquiry of how the signs mean or how statements gain their importance. And we realize that there are rarely any non-discursive statements of truth. There are rarely any non-discursive claims to right or wrong, because to define by and large what is right or wrong, you have to follow the discursive framework within which a certain thing is posited, within which it is stabilized and produced. So let's give you an example. There is a famous statement associated with Milton Friedman, right, the father of neoliberal economics, where he says that the main function of a corporation is to produce profit. And a corporation is only responsible to its shareholders, right? Now, to me, who's a leftist, right, that's an absurd statement. And the reason it is absurd is because I believe that corporations in the old sense of the term owe responsibility to governments, but also to people in whose areas they build their factories and all. So to me, that statement comes across as absurd because I'm detaching it from its own discourse of neoliberal economics and reading it within my own meaning-making processes within the discourse that I am in. But in the discourse of neoliberal capital, where it is assumed that government is an impediment, regulations stop people from reaching their full potential, and that the ultimate function of a corporation, since it is a profit-earning entity, its ultimate function is to produce more profit. And that is what it should focus on, not on moral issues, not on social issues. Within that discourse, that makes perfect sense. That's why millions of people in this world believe in it. It is the dominant economic system. It's not truth by itself. If you just stood up on a street and said that's what corporations ought to do, people would probably think you're crazy because you are just making the statement outside of its discursive framework, right? So as scholars of literature, it's important to know, of course, what is the theory of discourse, but what does discursive mean, right? And when you know that, when anyone claims in a text or in an essay that, oh, this is discursive or discursively speaking, keep in mind that they are talking about a certain discourse within which a certain truth is posited, within which a certain statement is made. And it is important to read that within that particular discourse and not abstract it from that discourse, because then it will lose the scaffolding upon which the meanings were built, right? Now, going further, I mean, if you think of our own actions in the world, of course, so many of our actions and the way we understand them are also discursive. They are discursively produced. Amongst friends, you speak differently, discursively. They understand in that discourse what you mean. You cannot actually use the same sign system, the same vocabularies or languages within another discourse of power. So by and large, we are also aware of when we shift from one discourse to other. We understand the power dynamics of any given discourse. And most of the times when we get in trouble with anyone, it is because we either knowingly defied the discursive explanations of that discourse or weren't aware of it, right? Cultural discourses are like that. Most of our actions within a given culture are an outcome of a discursive practice, right? And we practice our identities according to that. When we exceed that discursivity, right? When we do not follow the norms or permissibility or norms of acceptable behavior within a given discourse, then we are in trouble, right, with people. So keep these things in mind. So I hope this helps you next time when you read the word discursive in an academic book, or discursivity, or when you read references to this is discursively produced. Or sometimes people would say you're trying to reach the pre-discursive meaning of this, and that's a huge debate. Can we access the pre-discursive aspects of any given sign or any given truth, right? So I highly recommend that you should, of course, read Foucault, and to read his comprehensive discussion of different kind of discourses. Archaeology of Knowledge is the best book to read, but also if you want to read his explanation of power and discourses of power, History of Sexuality, Volume 1 would be a good book to read. That's all I have. I hope this was useful to you. Please let me know what you think. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. I'll try my best to answer those. And I hope you're staying safe and taking care of each other. Please continue to do so. Please, as always, continue to be generous and kind. I will now see you next time. Until then, as always, peace and love.